The Galactic Academy's most prestigious event was approaching, and it was a spectacle unlike anything the universe had ever seen. For generations, the greatest minds and warriors from across the cosmos had gathered here for the intergalactic tournament, a contest of skill, intellect, and strategy, where the galaxy's finest students competed for the title of champion. This year, however, there was a new name on the roster, Ethan Carter, a human from Earth, the unlikeliest of contenders. At first glance, Ethan didn't seem to belong. He wasn't a brilliant alien tactician with centuries of advanced knowledge, nor was he a genetically engineered prodigy from a race of intellectual giants. He was just a guy from Earth, raised on video games and a steady diet of competitive sports. But what he lacked in pedigree, he made up for with raw ambition and an unshakable belief in his own skills. The announcement had sent ripples of confusion through the academy. How could a mere human even dream of standing among beings who had evolved for millennia, honing their minds and abilities for such a grand tournament? His arrival sparked laughter in some quarters and indifference in others. To them, Ethan was little more than a curiosity, a novelty in the tournament's otherwise carefully crafted lineup. Still, Ethan didn't mind. He was used to being underestimated. In fact, it was the perfect position to be in. As a child, he had played games with his older brother, and time after time, he had learned that the key to winning wasn't just in knowing the rules. It was in understanding how to break them. Over the years, he had developed a reputation on Earth as a fierce competitor, known for his unpredictable strategies and a penchant for making his opponents second-guess everything they thought they knew about a game. But nothing could prepare him for what lay ahead. The tournament was set to begin with a test of strategic simulation games, a favorite among the galaxy's best tacticians. These games tested not just knowledge, but adaptability. How quickly could a player adjust when the rules changed mid-match? The stakes were high, and the expectations were even higher. The other players were prepared. They had trained for this their entire lives, mastering ancient strategies passed down through countless generations of alien civilizations. They had centuries of experience, technology at their fingertips, and the wisdom of their ancestors guiding their every move. And then there was Ethan. Standing in the competition hall, surrounded by beings of unimaginable intellect, Ethan felt the weight of every curious, judgmental stare. But rather than feeling intimidated, he grinned. He knew that the greatest strength a player could have was unpredictability. And that was something humanity had down to an art form. The first round of the tournament was about to begin, and Ethan stood in the back of the massive arena, his fingers tapping nervously against the edge of the holographic console before him. The towering screens above flashed with images of the first simulation, a battle for control over a desolate, resource-rich moon. Every player had their own strategy, their own plan to seize victory. Ethan had no strategy, not in the traditional sense. He had studied the basics. He knew the general structure of the game, the objectives, and the rules. But what really mattered to him was something different, instinct. He wasn't here to play by the book. He was here to make his own rules. Across the room, his first opponent, a sleek, four-armed Grievian named Katar, was already plugged into the system. Katar's kind had been genetically engineered for precision and speed, and their mental faculties could process information at incredible rates. The Grievian was widely regarded as one of the best, with a reputation for making decisions that seemed mathematically perfect every time. But Ethan had learned one thing from his years of gaming. Perfection wasn't always the answer. The countdown hit 0, and the simulation began. The initial moves were predictable. Tar quickly secured a commanding position, building resources and fortifying key locations with careful efficiency. Ethan, on the other hand, was already doing the unthinkable. He was moving his forces in unpredictable ways, bypassing traditional strategies and creating chaos on the battlefield. He knew it wouldn't make sense to care. He wasn't even trying to play the long game. He was playing for the surprise. Tar's multi-layered defense strategy was designed to trap opponents within certain expected moves, But Ethan was like a hurricane. He didn't follow any of the patterns Qatar was counting on. Instead of fortifying his position, Ethan sent a small group of units in an unexpected direction, overextending Qatar's carefully laid plans. His opponent was thrown off balance, forced to rethink his approach. What is he doing? Qatar muttered under his breath, his forearms frantically adjusting commands on his console. Ethan's strategy didn't make sense from a logical standpoint, yet it was working. He had forced Qatar into a corner, exploiting the Grievians' reliance on rigid, structured play. In the audience, whispers started. A few students had begun to realize something. They had seen this before. Humans were notorious for this kind of unpredictability. It wasn't about precision. It was about flexibility, and that was something the rest of the galaxy had never quite figured out. As the game progressed, Ethan's tactics grew more baffling. He attacked when others would retreat, defended when others would charge, and slowly but surely he pushed Qatar's forces back, chipping away at the foundation of the Grievians' perfect strategy. With a final bold move, Ethan launched an assault Qatar couldn't anticipate, overwhelming the alien in a brilliant, if chaotic, victory. The arena went silent for a moment. Then a few gasps. Ethan stood up from his seat, his fingers still lingering on the console. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He had just done the impossible. He had made Qatar, the genius tactician, second-guess everything he thought he knew about the game. In the back of the room, a quiet voice muttered, "This human's not like the others." Ethan couldn't have agreed more. The next round of the tournament came faster than Ethan expected. The victory over Qatar had shaken the entire arena, leaving the audience in stunned silence. Some were still trying to process how the human had won with such an unconventional approach. Even the most seasoned competitors were starting to take notice, but none more than Ethan's next opponent, Rock, a calculating TGI from the Saltharan cluster. The TGI were known for their eerie ability to predict every move an opponent would make, using their deep understanding of patterns and probabilities. Rock had never lost a game in his life. Not once. Ethan took a deep breath as he plugged into the simulation. He wasn't sure what to expect. The last game had been a fluke in many ways, an unorthodox victory that he knew he couldn't replicate by simply mimicking the same strategies. This was different. Rock wasn't someone who'd be thrown off by unpredictability. He was a master at reading people, a maestro at figuring out their weaknesses. The odds were stacked against him, but Ethan wasn't about to give up just because the odds didn't favor him. The simulation began. The map revealed a dense alien jungle, teeming with dangerous creatures and ancient technology. Rock wasted no time, swiftly gathering resources and scouting the perimeter, his movements so precise they were almost mechanical. Ethan, on the other hand, was taking his time. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't following any of the common opening strategies. "Let's see how he handles this," Ethan muttered, tapping a few commands. He didn't immediately push for resources or fight for control. Instead, he sent a few small units into the wilderness, placing them in odd, out-of-the-way locations, as if he were purposely abandoning them. Rock noticed this immediately, scanning the battlefield with intense focus. "What is he doing?" Rock said under his breath, an eyebrow raising. Ethan's strategy was simple, yet baffling. He was deliberately leaving holes in his defense, luring Rock into a false sense of security. Rock began moving his forces into what appeared to be a well-fortified area, thinking that Ethan's small troop movements were signs of weakness. The trap, however, was already set. As Rock's forces advanced toward what he believed was the heart of Ethan's territory, Ethan made his move. He had planted hidden units in the jungle, small but armed with high-tech cloaking devices. The instant Rock's forces stepped into range, the ambush was sprung. Explosions rocked the battlefield, sending Rock's troops scattering in all directions. The TGI had underestimated the human once again. "Impossible," Rock muttered, struggling to regain control. Ethan didn't hesitate. He pushed forward, seizing control of key points on the map, leaving Rock with little room to maneuver. The Tizai's predictive tactics faltered as Ethan adapted faster than Rock could calculate. With every move Ethan made, Rock's mind struggled to keep up. His understanding of the game was based on calculation, but Ethan was a force of chaos, a wave that Rock could not predict, no matter how hard he tried. As the game neared its final moments, Rock's once impressive forces were in disarray, and Ethan had cornered him in a deadly pincer attack. With one last brilliant move, Ethan wiped out the last of Rock's units, securing his second victory. This time, the silence in the arena was deafening. Rock, the champion of precision and prediction, had been defeated by a human who refused to play by the rules. And as Ethan stood up, his face calm and composed, the truth became clear to everyone watching. Humans didn't need to follow patterns to win. They could break them entirely. In the crowd, one thing was certain. The galaxy was beginning to realize they had underestimated humanity, and that was something no one would forget. By the time Ethan entered the third round, the buzz around his name was inescapable. He had already defeated two of the most respected competitors in the tournament. Kar, the Grievian prodigy, and Rock, the Tizai strategist who could calculate the most efficient moves faster than anyone in the galaxy. The arena was now electric with anticipation, the entire galaxy watching as this human continued to defy the odds. There were whispers in the hall, some out of awe, others tinged with doubt. Was he truly this skilled, or was it just a fluke? Ethan didn't care about the doubts. He had come here to prove something, not just to the galaxy, but to himself. The next round brought a new challenge, a face-off against Gilarn, an Izan from the Thilian Rim, a species of ultra-intelligent creatures known for their near-perfect memory and flawless execution of long-term strategies. The Izan were notorious for playing games like an endless chessboard, thinking 5, even 10 moves ahead. Gilarn had never lost a match in the intergalactic tournament, and he was widely considered the favorite to win it all. As Ethan plugged into the next simulation, the map flashed into view. A sprawling, resource-rich asteroid field, littered with ancient shipwrecks and abandoned mining stations. A dangerous environment for sure, one that would require constant adjustments and quick thinking. Gilarn wasted no time. His opening moves were calculated, efficient, building the solid base and securing critical resources while avoiding the more perilous parts of the asteroid belt. His strategy was precise and predictable, but it was also inflexible. Gilarn believed that if something had worked countless times before, it would work again. Ethan, on the other hand, had learned from the last two games that predictability was his enemy. Ethan started off cautiously, but this time, he didn't rush to secure the resources. Instead, he took a different approach. He sent scouts, small, seemingly insignificant units, into the densest parts of the asteroid field. Gilarn, ever the tactician, took the bait. He assumed that Ethan was making a mistake by sending forces into hostile terrain and left his more valuable assets open for attack. Within moments, Ethan struck. He launched a surprise raid on one of Gilarn's mining stations, disrupting his resource flow. Gilarn immediately began to adjust his strategy, but Ethan didn't stop there. He didn't wait for Gilarn to build another countermeasure. Instead, he began creating chaos, pulling back units, and then launching ambushes in multiple locations at once. He scattered his forces in ways that made no sense to the Izan, who was used to playing with a clear, linear path to victory. Gilarn was not accustomed to this. For the first time in the tournament, the Izan couldn't predict his opponent's next move. Every time Gilarn adjusted, Ethan was already somewhere else, making it harder and harder for him to control the flow of the game. The tension mounted as the game entered its final stages. Gilarn had tried to regain control, but Ethan's constant shifting tactics and sudden, unexplainable moves had left the Izan's forces fragmented and weak. In a final bold maneuver, Ethan managed to outmaneuver Gilarn's forces, overwhelming them in a surprise attack that seemed impossible. As the last of Gilarn's units fell, the arena exploded in shock and disbelief. Ethan had done it again. He had defeated a player who prided himself on being able to read the future itself. Ethan's unpredictability, his refusal to follow the norms, had once again proven to be his greatest strength. In the stunned silence that followed, a single thought ran through the minds of every competitor and spectator. Asterisk, asterisk, this human wasn't just skilled. He was a game changer, asterisk, asterisk. The rules of the tournament were being rewritten, and the galaxy had just learned the hard way that underestimating humanity could be its biggest mistake. The final round was upon him. The atmosphere in the galactic arena was electric, thick with anticipation. Ethan Carter, the human who had defied all expectations, was about to face his greatest challenge yet. The reigning champion, Velen Tor, a Kaivar from the war-hardened planet Korthan. Velen was a tactical genius, a veteran of 1,000 simulated battles, known for his unparalleled ability to manipulate even the most unpredictable of situations. His species had evolved to process combat strategies in real time, combining instinct and intellect in a way few could ever hope to match. For years, he had held the crown of the tournament, defeating one opponent after another with cold precision. Ethan knew this would be different. Velen wasn't just an opponent. He was a legend. And if there was one thing Ethan had learned from the tournament so far, it was that legends were made of something entirely different. Velen had faced every kind of competitor, from the most disciplined to the most chaotic. But he had never faced someone like Ethan. The simulation for the final round was set in the heart of a shattered post-apocalyptic city, once a thriving hub of galactic commerce, now a ruin filled with treacherous streets, collapsing buildings, and remnants of powerful weapons. Resources were scarce, the environment unforgiving. This wasn't a game for beginners. This was a test of adaptability, of the ability to turn disaster into opportunity. And as the countdown began, Ethan's heart raced, but his mind was clear. He didn't need to rely on anyone's expectations this time. He didn't need to follow any predetermined path. The game started, and instantly, Velen took command. His opening strategy was precise and devastating. He took control of the central ruins with an iron grip, rapidly establishing dominance and cutting off Ethan's path to resources. Velen's every move was calculated, his fleet of robotic drones sweeping across the city in a synchronized advance, prepared for every possible outcome. Ethan, however, remained calm. Unlike previous opponents, Velen's strategy wasn't something to exploit. His strength lay in his adaptability and ability to predict reactions. But Ethan wasn't playing the same game as Velen. While the Kaivar pressed forward with ruthless efficiency, Ethan took a different approach. He had learned that Velen, like the others, relied on control. If Ethan could break that control, even for a moment, he might just stand a chance. Ethan's first move was a diversion. Rather than contesting Velen's hold on the city center, he spread his forces thin across the outskirts, sending small, unimportant units into the ruins. To the untrained eye, it looked like a losing strategy. Velen would crush them easily. But Ethan had a trick up his sleeve. Hidden deep within the crumbling city, Ethan had planted a series of sabotage devices, each one linked to the volatile energy cores scattered across the battlefield. He wasn't going to win through brute force. He was going to win through disruption. As Velen's forces advanced, they encountered their first obstacle. A massive explosion ripped through the outskirts, decimating a portion of his forces. The blast wasn't enough to end the game, but it was enough to make Velen pause. He knew this wasn't the typical human approach. There was something different about this player, a sense of chaos that was unlike any opponent he had faced. Velen hesitated for the first time. That was all Ethan needed. With lightning speed, he initiated a second wave of attacks. This time, it wasn't a distraction, it was a real assault. Ethan's small units, previously thought to be expendable, now carried the weight of a devastating counteroffensive. They were everywhere, sabotaging Velen's drones, triggering chain reactions, and most crucially, keeping the Kaivar's forces spread too thin to mount a coordinated defense. For the first time in the entire tournament, Villain was on the defensive. The champion who had been the embodiment of cold, calculated strategy was now reacting, scrambling to regain control. Ethan could feel it. The tide was turning. As the final simulation ended and the arena erupted into thunderous applause, Ethan stood motionless, still processing what had just happened. The overwhelming sensation of victory didn't come as a wave of triumph, but as a quiet acknowledgement of everything he'd been through. The entire galaxy had watched him defy expectations, shatter norms, and topple one legend after another. Yet, in the midst of all the cheers and the flashing lights, the only thing Ethan felt was a quiet sense of disbelief. The applause was deafening, but it was the look on Velen's face that lingered in Ethan's mind. The Kaivar champion was still plugged into his console, staring at the defeated simulation, a mixture of confusion and respect in his eyes. For the first time in his career, Velen had been caught off guard. And as Ethan met his gaze, he knew that the tournament had not only changed the galaxy's perception of humanity, it had changed the course of galactic history. As Ethan exited the arena, he was met by an overwhelming crowd of reporters, officials, and students, all eager to hear from the human who had just become a living legend. But amid the chaos, a familiar face appeared in the crowd. Dr. Amelia Foster, one of the few humans to attend the Galactic Academy. She had watched every round from the stands, her face a picture of pride. Dr. Foster had been the one to vouch for Ethan's participation, pushing against the doubt and ridicule that had initially followed his entry into the tournament. Now, seeing him stand victorious, she felt vindicated in her belief that humans had something to offer this galaxy, something no one could anticipate. "You did it, Ethan," Dr. Foster said, smiling as she approached him. "You really did it." Ethan flashed a grin, but it wasn't one of arrogance. It was a smile of relief. "I didn't just win," he said. "I changed the game." And that was true. Ethan's victory was more than just a personal achievement. It was a declaration that humanity had a place in the galaxy's elite circles, that their way of thinking, raw, unpredictable, and innovative, could no longer be dismissed as inferior. He had shown the galaxy that humans could adapt, surprise, and overcome even the most formidable of opponents. But as the celebrations continued, something else began to settle over Ethan, a feeling that this was only the beginning. The tournament had been the first step, but it wasn't the end. The galaxy had just witnessed humanity's potential, and Ethan knew it wouldn't stop there. There were countless challenges ahead, not just in games, but in the very real struggles the galaxy faced. And this victory was only a signal of the larger changes to come. Ethan's victory had proved something far greater than his own skill. It had proven that humanity's time in the galaxy was just beginning. The galaxy had underestimated them once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. As the celebrations continued into the night, the magnitude of Ethan's victory began to sink in. The Galactic Tournament was not just a competition. It was a cultural event, a nexus where species from every corner of the universe came to prove their worth, their intellect, and their ability to outmaneuver the best. And for the first time in its history, a human had taken the crown. The ramifications of this were still unfolding. Ethan sat in the VIP lounge, surrounded by flashing holo ads and offers for sponsorships. His name was now a global sensation, but amid the excitement, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. This victory wasn't just about games. It was a turning point for humanity's place in the galaxy. As the first human to ever win, he had opened doors that had once been closed to his species. The galaxy now saw humans as something more than just primitive, unpredictable outsiders. Dr. Amelia Foster approached him, her expression a mix of pride and something deeper, concern, perhaps. "Ethan, we need to talk." He looked up, sensing the gravity in her tone. "About what?" "I've been hearing rumors," she said, lowering her voice as if to keep it from the growing crowd around them. "The higher-ups are already planning something. You know what this tournament means for humanity's future, right?" Ethan leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "You're talking about more than just the tournament." "Yes," Dr. Foster replied. There are factions within the Galactic Senate who are seeing your victory as a sign. They believe humans are ready to take a more active role in galactic politics. There's talk of sending human diplomats to represent Earth in high-level talks, forming alliances, and even pushing for a permanent seat on the Senate Council. Ethan's mind raced. A seat on the Council. That's a big jump. We've never even had a representative there. I know, she said, but your victory has shown them that humans have more to offer than anyone could have imagined. It's not just about strength in battle. It's about the way you think, how you can break the rules and still succeed. And that's something the galaxy is going to want on their side. Ethan rubbed his chin thoughtfully. The implications were huge. A permanent seat on the Galactic Senate meant more influence, more power, but it also meant more responsibility. The entire fate of humanity could change in an instant, and he wasn't sure he was ready for that. We'd be entering a new era, Dr. Foster continued. Humanity would no longer be on the sidelines. You've already shown that we can hold our own. But the question is, what do we do next? Ethan stared at the flashing holo-ads around him, the weight of the decision slowly settling in. The galaxy was watching him, not just as a player, but as a symbol of what humanity could become. This was no longer just about games. It was about taking humanity's place in the universe, one decision at a time. Let's take it one step at a time, Ethan said finally, his voice steady. We've earned our place. Now it's time to prove we belong. Dr. Foster smiled, knowing full well that Ethan's journey was only just beginning. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for too long. And now, thanks to a single human who had dared to defy the odds, that era was over. The future was waiting. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Ethan's victory in the Galactic tournament had reverberated across every corner of the galaxy, sparking conversations that echoed through political halls, corporate boardrooms, and academic forums. The human who had defied all expectations, shattered the dominance of the galaxy's most elite competitors, and earned a place among the stars, was now a symbol of what humanity could achieve. But with this newfound fame came the weight of a future Ethan wasn't entirely prepared for. Ethan found himself summoned to the Galactic Senate, a gathering of representatives from species across the universe, a place where the fate of planets was decided. The Senate had always been a domain for those with centuries of political maneuvering behind them. But now, humanity was about to sit at the table for the first time, thanks to Ethan's performance in the tournament. As Ethan entered the Grand Hall, the sheer scale of the Senate chamber took his breath away. Massive holographic displays, glowing emblems of dozens of species, and representatives from every corner of the galaxy filled the space. But what struck him the most were the eyes upon him. Curiosity, skepticism, and even some hostility. He was the first human to stand here. And for many of the galactic powers, that was something they weren't quite ready to accept. He was escorted to a seat next to Dr. Foster, who had become his advisor of sorts, guiding him through the political maelstrom. "You can do this, Ethan," she whispered as he sat down. "Just remember why we're here." Before he could respond, the assembly quieted as the Supreme Chancellor, a tall, angular being of the Uthran species, stepped to the podium. His voice echoed through the hall, commanding immediate attention. "The time has come for the Galactic Senate to discuss humanity's future. We have seen the extraordinary talents displayed by Ethan Carter, and it is clear that humanity has much to offer. But the question remains, are they truly ready to take their place among us?" His eyes shifted toward Ethan. Do they seek cooperation or domination? The room fell silent. The question was loaded, a subtle test of humanity's intentions. Ethan swallowed hard, knowing the gravity of the moment. This wasn't a game. It was a test of diplomacy, of humanity's ability to play by the rules of the galaxy. No one could predict how this would go, but Ethan knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let fear dictate his response. With steady hands, he stood. "Humanity doesn't want domination," Ethan began, his voice carrying through the chamber. "We've always believed in the power of collaboration, innovation, and progress. Our victory in the tournament wasn't just a display of skill. It was proof that we have the potential to contribute, to learn, and to lead alongside the other species of this galaxy. We're ready to work with you, not over you. Together, we can build something better." The room was still, but not for long. Slowly, murmurs began to ripple through the Senate chamber. Some were skeptical, some intrigued, and others plainly astonished by the humans' confidence. But one thing was clear. Ethan had done what he always did. He had broken through the expected, delivering a response that no one could have predicted. Dr. Foster smiled at him, proud of how far humanity had come, and how far they would go. The era of humans being underestimated had ended. The galaxy might never be the same again, but it was undeniable that humanity was here to stay. As the session continued, the tone had shifted. The discussions were no longer about if humanity would have a place at the table. Now the conversation was about how humanity would shape the future of the galaxy, and Ethan Carter, the human who had defied all odds, was leading the charge.